the Savior, heart and soul, Lord, for our land. It is you, Lord, who knows our weakness. You refine us with your hand. Oh Lord, prepare me to be sanctuary, pure and holy, tried and true. With thanksgiving, I'll be a living sanctuary for you. Awesome singing. Very edifying. We are one day away from closing this meeting out. Dean and I want to thank you all for the kind attention you've given to us. Not only listening to me and all my hot air, but the kindness you've shown us outside this building. We will never forget it. Still trying to find a crack in the armor, but I haven't yet. You guys are an awesome group, and I say that with all humility and truthfulness. I don't whitewash a whole lot of stuff, as you guys have known over the course of a few days. It's good to have everybody here tonight. It's always good, you know. You guys got to meet our son and daughter, Danny and Rico, earlier this week. And now, tonight, you get to meet one of our other sons. Carlos and Arlene are here from Paducah. So, the most important part about that is our grandson came. That's Kendrick's battle buddy from summer PTP. So they're rebonding up here on the front row. But if you haven't met Carlos, he's a phenomenal, he's like Brandon, cut from the same cloth. Unapologetic, straightforward preaching. And he is from Arizona, so you've got to give him a little bit of break because he's still trying to get used to these winters here. But it's good to have him with us as well. Tonight, we are going to be looking at some things, and I'm going to be very unkind to the people who have propagated this nonsense, to the people who have destroyed churches with this nonsense, to the people who are promoting this nonsense. So I'm preparing you for that. And I want you to start by looking at 1 Kings chapter 18. You know, the other day I told you my favorite Bible verse is Romans 12 and verse 2. My favorite Bible character of all Bible characters, of course, except for the Lord. That's always number one. But my very favorite Bible character of all times is the prophet Elijah. This man was a beast. And he went up on Mount Carmel with over 400 prophets of Baal against the king of Israel and really against the nation of Israel. And he went up there to do battle for God. You know, last night we talked about for such a time as this, what is your battle? How do you fight it? Where do you belong in the fight? Well, Elijah went up there and took on these men, but he just didn't go up there and take on these men. He went up there and destroyed them. He mocked these false preachers, these false prophets. If you look over in verse 27, we won't read the whole story tonight, but they're trying to invoke their God down to set this altar on fire that they had built. And they couldn't do it. They're cutting themselves, they're screaming loud from daylight to dark, and it's getting in the middle of the day, and Elijah just starts in on them. And he says, cry aloud, for he is a God, little g. Either he's musing, maybe he's taking a nap, or he's relieving himself, maybe he's on the pot. He shows no respect whatsoever for the false religion of Baal, nor his prophets. Maybe he's on a journey, he says, or perhaps he's asleep and must be awakened. And they cried aloud and cut themselves after the custom was, with swords and lances, and blood gushed out upon them. Now, differently, Elijah didn't treat the people who had been misled by these people. He understood that they had been misled. And after they're done with their little mockery, Elijah starts to teach. And in verse 30, he calls the children of Israel. He says, come near to me. All the people came near to him. He repaired the altar of the Lord that had been thrown down. And Elijah took 12 stones. You know why he took 12 stones? He's teaching. He takes these 12 stones that represent the 12 nations of Israel to remind these people who they are. You're not followers of Baal. You're followers of Yahweh. Remember who you are. That's what our lesson is going to do tonight. We're not mocking the people that have been misled by this teaching. I feel sorry for them. I want them to know the truth. We need to share with them the truth. But I have no sympathy, respect, or anything else for the people who have propagated this garbage. And garbage it is. So what is the house church movement really? Sometimes people try to mislabel it. We're not talking about a church that meets in a house. In fact, last night I showed you some of the works that I helped start. 2 of them are still meeting in a home. We're not talking about that. We're not talking about a faithful, godly group of Christians. That's not the house church movement, as we're going to see as we move through this. The house church movement comes about these books. Radical Restoration here. John Mark Hicks over here. Those are the 2 biggest propagators of this nonsense. But the problem with brethren is this. They should be reading this. If you read this, then that other stuff becomes nonsense. There's too many people that read too many books. Now, I'm not saying that all books are bad. We're not going to have a book burning. But when you're training yourself to be a Christian, you've got to use the right book. When you're trying to conduct proper worship, you have to use the right book. And it's not some book written by somebody who's disgruntled with the Lord's church. Gene Edwards has this book, How to Start a House Church from Scratch. And it is nothing but garbage. We're not talking about, and again, this is how they sell it to you. It's like boiling a frog. They sell it to you. We're going to talk about all the buzzwords to listen for. You'll have brethren who'll move here, and they'll start doing these things that we're going to talk about tonight. And you're like, man, that fat guy from St. Robert said this was going to happen, and it is. That's exactly what he said. But it's not a house church. There's a house church mentioned in Romans, a congregation that meets in a home in 1 Corinthians chapter 16, verse 19. That's not the house church movement of today. Those are just 2 congregations that met in a home. Their motivation is to get rid of the traditions and the authority of the New Testament. Turn to 2 Thessalonians. You're a traditionalist. I'm like, amen.